So welcome to Replenish, everybody. Hopes that sustains in the midst of adversity. This is a safe place where I invite special guests to share their insight and encouragement to replenish us on the journey of raising kids from hard places. So whether you're foster parent, adoptive parent, kinship, or a safe family, this conversation is for you. I'm your host, Tristan McGee. I am an adoptive mom as well. I am a wife of 20 years. I'm a teacher as well as a TBRI practitioner. So before I introduce our special guest today, I just want to remind you the chat is open. Feel free to chat amongst yourselves. Feel free to ask questions. I'll try to monitor it the best I can. Feel free to answer each other's questions as well. Like I said, this chat, this conversation, this is for you. So today I have invited a very special guest and a very special friend of mine, Dr. Deborah Graves, to join us for a conversation about trauma and the sensory system. So hi, Deborah. Just before we get going real quick, let me just tell everybody what some of the few things that make you so amazing. So Deborah received her bachelor's degree in environmental studies and both her master's and her doctorate degree in occupational therapy. Prior to becoming an occupational therapist, she taught pre-K through sixth grade science, outdoor ed, and was also a swimming, sailing, kayaking, and outdoor adventure instructor. She is an ARS, is that how you say that?
Gene Ayers.
An AIRS sensory integration specialist and a trust-based relational intervention practitioner. As an occupational therapist, she applies her previous teaching experiences and multisensory design research to provide therapy in a variety of indoor and outdoor settings, utilizing both built and natural environments to help calm, challenge, and engage clients, healing their nervous system and relationships. She has extensive trauma training and is currently developing Creature Comforts, a therapeutic movement program for children and families to heal together from complex developmental trauma. So that is just wonderful. She's a very special guest, has a host of information for us today. So let's just get started. Deborah, can you just tell us as we start things off, what started you in this whole journey of world from kids from hard places?
Thanks, Tristan, and thanks so much for inviting me today. And I'm very happy to get to be here with all of you. And my hope is that through our sharing today, that I'll have some ideas and some hope that would comfort you throughout our conversation and beyond. And I am going to stay in the after party from 5:30 to 6. So if you have any questions, be sure to write those down in case we don't get to them in the chat. So just go ahead and write those down and we'll have time to talk about some of those in the after party. So thanks again for having me.
Thanks for mentioning that.
Yes.
We always do an after party for those of you that don't know, from 5:30 to 6 o'clock. And we turn off the recording and it's just a half an hour of community time where you guys all can unmute, you can ask questions, and we just get to know each other. So go ahead.
Okay, so my journey, I guess, in a nutshell, is that like many of you, I too, came from a background childhood that had some challenges and difficulties, and then later in my adulthood, worked on facing some of those challenges and fears, and was drawn to helping others work through their fears, whether it was, in an outdoor recreation setting, or when I was a traveling science teacher, I worked a lot with animals. And so helping children and other, teachers and adults in the coming to the program to feel safe. And so I had just kind of a crash course in learning what the nervous system looks like with that fear response. And trying to support people to work through their fears and to feel safe. And then felt, led to go back to school and get my master's and doctorate in occupational therapy. And during that time, taking courses on sensory integration, sensory processing disorder, the lights were going off. I could relate to so many things because of my own childhood, some of those sensory sensitivities, and just really wanted to develop resources for children and their families to feel safe in their own skin and in their environments. And then after graduating, I attended a talk given by Elizabeth Steife at Saddleback Church on trust-based relational intervention, which really looks at attachment issues and how they are also impacted by sensory sensitivities. And so I just felt like that was a huge missing piece for me. So gosh, that was about 7 years ago, and I've been researching trauma and attachment since then, and just have a heart for wanting to help others to heal from that.
I love that. I love that you're an occupational therapist and that you understand that how trauma and early childhood, just those issues that come up, how that relates to occupational therapy. Because being trauma informed, and not only are you trauma informed, but you are a trust-based relational intervention practitioner. So to me, that's the gold standard of what it means to be trauma informed. Um, and you're an occupational therapist. And we know from research, and TBRI tells us that a lot of these kiddos, they can have sensory related issues. So why don't you start us off with just giving us a general overview of our sensory system? Like, just give us a refresher. And I know that there's some senses that I didn't know about until I started understanding more about TBRI. So why don't you just give us a quick overview?
Sure. So we have, of course, the ones that we're all familiar with that we learn around, in pretty much in preschool, our 5 basic senses. And then we also have senses that maybe are not so familiar. And those are internal senses that one is proprioception and another is vestibular. And then we've got 2 more that I'll share as well. But proprioception is proprioceptors are found in our joints and our ligaments, our tendons. They're found in our connective tissue and also within our muscles. And when those are stimulated, that gives us our sense of where our body is in relation to other objects around us, how much pressure or force we need to accomplish something, like picking up a glass without dropping it. It also gives us a real sense of orientation. So I like to think of it as if you look at a map that has a little sticker on it that says you are here, then you use that point to help you orient to the rest of your surroundings. But if that sticker is gone on a map like that, then it's not going to be useful. So our proprioceptive system really helps us to orient to ourselves as well as to our external environment. Our vestibular system is in our inner ear, and that helps us to understand our relationship to gravity, our relationship to have our head. Do we know if our head is upright and maintaining it in an upright position? And it helps us understand velocity of movement, how fast we're going, the direction of movement. So that's the vestibular system. And both of those really help to contribute to our sense of self in our physical world. And then our 2 more senses is our interoception, and that is our ability to sense if we're hungry, if we're tired, how fast our heart is racing, what is our respiration rate, our breathing, to really get in touch with pain. If we are feeling pain, some children are not aware if they're in pain, and whether that's a physical injury or just internal pain. And then the last one is neuroception, and that is our perception of all of these sensory experiences. So our perception of our internal environment and our external environment, and really negotiating whether or not we think this is a safe sensory experience or an unsafe sensory experience.
Wow, I love all that. I don't know much about. I know, in TBRI we learn a lot about the proprioceptive and the vestibular systems, senses, but I don't know much about that interoception and that neuroception. And when you were talking about the interoception and the pain and how we can, it helps us negotiate that or be aware of it. Thinking about kids with trauma backgrounds and bringing our senses like into that. I know a lot of kids have a high tolerance to pain. And so I'm just wondering how much of our senses are related to that trauma, the early childhood trauma that we talk about with kids that come from hard places. So can you talk to us a little bit about how our senses are affected by that chronic stress?
Sure. Well, to kind of back up just a little bit, our sensory system is really our system to help us to survive, and we are, whether we're conscious or unconscious of it, we're monitoring our external and our internal environment to determine if we're safe or not. And so we can have a heightened sense of arousal and vigilance in that monitoring process, or we can have a hypo or lower level of arousal. And so when we're looking at self-regulation or any kind of regulation, that's going to be impacted by how our brain and how our body is taking in the information from outside ourselves and inside ourselves, and then also determining if it's safe or unsafe. And with interoception, that part of us gets developed with the interaction with a trusted caregiver. So the caregiver as a baby, when you're a baby, the caregiver is going to be rocking you. That's going to give you that, develop the vestibular sense, and then maybe bouncing you. That's going to develop the but then also just attending to your needs. And so when you're wet, when you have a wet diaper and you're crying, and the caregiver comes and says, "Oh, you're crying, you have a wet diaper, let me help you with that," or, "Oh, you are hungry, let me help you with that." And so those basic needs, when the caregiver is attending to those basic needs, then we start to get a sense of our own needs, and an embodied sense of that self, like, "Oh, I'm hungry," and the caregiver is responding to this is what hunger is, and this is what the response to hunger is. And, "Oh, I'm tired," and so my caregiver is comforting me, to settle me, to help me to sleep. "I'm uncomfortable, I've got this tactile sensation that's uncomfortable, that's a wet diaper," and my caregiver is responding to that tactile discomfort. So if early on there's a mismatch, or there's a neglect, or if a caregiver is not safe and is responding in a way that does not bring a sense of safety and comfort with those basic needs, then a child can start to develop a mismatch with their own understanding of their own body, um, as well as a mismatch with their external environment, that it's unsafe. This is an unsafe world.
That's
So,
so fascinating. All that stuff that you just said, I mean, that is the attachment cycle, right? So not only are they building trust, which is the main thing that we talk about when we talk about that attachment cycle, but when that, what you're saying, when that infant has a need, that parent meets the need and that child builds trust. But also, there's so much more that doesn't get talked about that you're talking about that goes into um, wiring the brain, and what you're talking about is our senses develop according to that early attachment cycle or lack thereof, either way. And so our kids who have come from hard places, it makes sense why some of those things are a risk factor for them having sensory issues as well. So I think that's so fascinating. So, um, what is trauma then from like that body sensory standpoint? We talk about the body keeps score, we talk about how trauma is stored in the body. So, how does that all fit together and relate to what we're talking about as far as sensory development or it getting derailed or not developing?
yeah, I think really first and foremost, it's that when we don't have that mirroring, and we don't have that attachment cycle, um, and that actually starts in the womb. So if there has been a difficult pregnancy, if there's been an illness during pregnancy, if there's been any kind of trauma, if the birth mother is in a country where there is political unrest, and also if the birth mother has major depression, anxiety, stress, um, and even if she is coming from a place of having no support and not knowing what she's going to do, because with having the baby and considering abortion or adoption, that attachment cycle it doesn't happen, and it should be happening in utero. It should be happening with a healthy, happy pregnancy that feels safe, and that neurological sensory wiring, that internal sense of self, starts to develop in the womb with how the mother is relating to the baby. So if the baby is born in a difficult circumstance, so kids from hard places, whether it's the child is born and then adopted day one, if there's been a history of that pregnancy being very difficult for any number of reasons, then that child can have coping mechanisms. I think we think that babies are babies, that they're a clean slate, but they're not. They're born with that basic wiring, and if the wiring is already miswired, then the baby starts to develop a lack of a sense of connection to themselves, that interoception, that neuroception, along with the other sensory systems building around that the child has a way of coping that separates their core sense of self, and that's the trajectory that that they're on. And I was reading a quote that someone, one of the researchers I've been reading about, was writing that just like a wolf will chew off its leg to escape a trap, that a child born under those circumstances will sacrifice their own sense of organized and integrated self for the sake of feeling safe, to escape the reality of my world that I'm entering into is not a safe place. So having that disconnection from self, and not being able to relate to oneself as being in a body, with agency, the the child again continues on a trajectory of, not only some mental health challenges, but also the physical challenges that come from, whether it's a body that's always in a state of fight or flight, which is a contracted state. It typically is going to be more upright and contracted and alert and hypervigilant, or it's going to be in a the child will be in a state of being shut down. And again, both of those are states of being disconnected from the body and the rest of the senses, or the senses are distorted. And we know from the long-term ACEs study that that the body cannot endure that way. We need to have our systems online, and we need to have the systems online and relating to others, so that we can, have, all the rest of our systems healthy, and to be able to mature in a healthy way. We get inflammation in the body because of stress, and we know inflammation is really the root of so many other chronic diseases. So in the ACEs study, we see those chronic diseases of, diabetes, and heart issues, and many other health issues.
Yeah, I love that you bring up that children who, like, women who have stressful pregnancies, and or difficult labor, or that early hospitalization. I love that you bring that up, because so many people in the foster adopt community, um, they can have a child that is experiencing sensory issues or behavioral issues, and they think, but I was there in the hospital when his mom was giving birth, or but I got him when he was only a few months old. So I love the fact that you bring that out, that because as a parent, we can take so much on ourselves and think that I thought I did everything right, and feel like somehow we contributed to that. So understanding that the brain is being wired in utero, and being bathed in that stress bath, if the mom is stressed out, and even if she knows she's maybe giving up her child willingly, in that type of an adoption situation, it's still very stressful. So I like that you bring that up. And I also, because I think that can set some of us at ease, but I'd also like to ask, so what about the child that comes to us, uh, and they're a little bit older toddler? So they've had several years of maybe difficult, challenging situations. And how is that trauma stored in the body? You talked a little bit about, like the physical attributes, like we know how our health can be affected by stress. You were mentioning inflammation, but what other ways? I mean, I hear so much the body keeps score. Like, what does that mean um, for us as maybe parents, but also for the child who isn't an infant, an older child who has had years of chronic trauma, and just like we were saying, comes from those hard places. What does that mean for that child? How is that stored in the body?
Well, it is based really on their adaptive strategy. So what was their adaptive strategy that seemed to work for them in those early childhood experiences? So was it adaptive for them to be in a state of fight flight, kind of having, your dukes up and ready, and there's also the coping of a numbing effect of not being able to be aware of their own body and their own needs, and shutting down their needs, and not acknowledging that, not even feeling a sense of feeling what their needs are. And in both of those, fight, flight, or that kind of freeze response can have that
So,
shutting down of needs. Yeah.
so like, are you saying, so let's say they have these responses, which we know the fight, flight, or freeze response, and that part of the body, brain is overstimulated or overdeveloped. So they have those responses easier. So are you saying, like, let's just take fight, for example. The trauma is stored in the body in the sense that those fighting responses, the physical part of it, like the tension, and like you were talking about, the stiffening, the heart rate racing, all of those things. Is that what you mean? Or is that what people mean when they talk about the trauma story? Is it that physical part
Yeah.
of the fight, flight, or freeze response?
Yes, that's the adaptive strategy that worked for them. So it's cataloged as, this is the go-to response. This is what I'm going to do in order to survive. And that is the trauma um, presenting in the body in the form of the physiological response of that, alert stance, and also the detachment of being even aware of being in that alert stance, aware that there are other choices available in a safer environment, the ability um, to look at the new environment and assess it differently.
Mhm.
There's a disconnect there. And the same with the shutting down mode as well, that collapse. There's a disconnect from the body to be able to recognize that this isn't the same. This isn't what I had before. This is new. And there's a resistance to that. With kids from hard places, so much of their life was before you as their caregiver. um, it's quite likely that connecting with another human was not safe. That person that was their caregiver was not a safe person. And so although they have a deep desire to connect, um, the ability to do so is not necessarily there, because that part of the brain did not get developed where seeking comfort from another is something that is actually comforting. That there's a part of the brain that is wired for connection, and if connection was not made, then comfort is not gained from human connection. um,
Yeah, I always feel like parents who are raising kids with trauma backgrounds, um, it's so challenging for that reason, because I think, one, we can't see that. We can't see that they fundamentally um, don't have that even foundation of what it feels like to be comforted by a person and to seek that out. And we can't see that this fight, flight, or freeze response, like you were saying, that it's overactive, and it's in the body. We see, the tantrums, we see the behavior that is everything else that we talk about, the lying, the stealing, the overreactiveness, the nose, the all that stuff, the sass. And it's so hard, I think, to wrap your mind around, because normally in a biological kid or other kids, you see that behavior and it's easier to turn it around. You kind of have established that trust. You can, do things differently. But with kids with this trauma background, when you come up against that, if you come up against that in the same way, it just escalates and it gets worse. And so I find it so challenging, because not only are you trying to build new pathways, but you have to erase the old ones. Like, those old ones are still there. And so I love Dr. Karen Purvis talks about like those old pathways being like a 5-lane highway, and we're in a jungle hacking a new pathway with a machete, but that 5-lane highway is still there. And so it takes so much effort to build those new pathways, and it takes so much time and patience and compassion, which can be challenging for the parent as well. And I like to see, like Melissa Corkum, she was on, and she's always says she views it as an unseen disability, and like that's really helped me, is saying my kid has an unseen disability. And it may not be as sensory as you're saying, like, but it is. The more I learn about the senses, the more I see, like, him picking at himself, or that hypervigilance, all of those things that you're saying, and that fight. He's a fighter, but I do know there's flight and freeze. I don't experience that. I get the fight, but all those bodily sensations, how they're related to what you're saying. So um, how does like occupational therapy, how can that help with that kind of integration as well? Like, how is that? I guess, how is that the occupational therapy? I just think of it differently. I don't always think of it. It's new to think about in terms of kids with trauma and helping them be regulate and help them attach relationally as well.
Yeah.
But you've managed to do that.
Um, well, so occupational therapy versus trauma informed occupational therapy, or there's a gradient there. And so I've sought more training because of the population of people that I'm drawn to. And so I've sought that, wanting to become trauma informed, um, and having sensory integration immersion course and all of that. But I think what it really starts with is you as a caregiver, me as a caregiver, um, really getting in touch with our own areas of dysregulation, and coming to those areas with compassion. I realized as I've gone through this, learning process myself, that that although I had, worked with animals, and had to, get over my fear of animals so that I could present them to, to children and, school groups without, showing fear. But I learned that I was stuffing my fear, that I was stuffing my fear at the price of trying to help them feel safe, help them feel secure. And so it was important for me, then becoming an occupational therapist, I had that skill of being able to get in touch with, what's my heart rate doing, what's my breathing doing, to try to stay calm in a therapy session where the child is having a really hard time, and the caregiver might also be having a hard time. But what I learned was that is not enough. It's not enough to learn to control your heart rate, your respiration rate, and come from just, being calm, cool, collected, in control, that that there's still a neglect of a need, and that need is, this is hard. This is not easy to be calm in this situation. This is not easy to provide assistance to this person who's having a hard time. And so really, all of us as caregivers, I think the first thing is, we've heard it a million times, you got to put your oxygen mask on first.
Right.
And it's almost a cliche now that we don't really hear it, maybe, but the truth is that we need to genuinely be resourced within ourselves to be able to provide the kind of support that the child needs in that situation, where whether they're dysregulated in a state of hyper arousal, or they're dysregulated in that they're under aroused and it's hard to reach them and they're shut down. We are wired for connection. We've got mirror neurons that are playing off of one another, and if the child is
Can
having,
you explain what mirror neurons are for
um,
people?
so in our brain we have a part of our brain that, if someone else is whether it's a physical movement that they're doing, so it's a motor movement that we're familiar with, it's very fascinating, but our that part of our brain that knows how to do that will be firing. So that was the first discovery, was, oh, we've got neurons that fire when we're observing someone else doing something that we're familiar with and we know how to do ourselves. But now more research has come out that we also have
Does
neuro.
that mean, Deborah, like if I'm watching someone hula hooping, because I know how to hula hoop, if I'm watching someone hula hooping, I have those mirror neurons firing in my brain?
Exactly, in your
Okay.
motor cortex, as
Okay.
if you were also hula hooping.
Wow. That's so, that is fascinating. Just that alone, right?
Yeah, yeah. And if someone's doing something that's familiar, but we don't quite know how to do it, then there's a part of our motor cortex that'll be firing, along with our problem solving part of our cortex that is trying to figure out how to do what they're doing. So that was like our the initial discovery. And then we've further discovered that we have a part of our brain that also is firing with empathy. So when we are recognizing, whether it's through their facial expressions, through the tone of their voice, the quality of their voice, even their posture, like how they are coming to us, before us, our brain is mirroring that, is experiencing that as well, and that's part of our empathy part of our brain. And so if we aren't able to be aware of that mirroring process as caregivers, then our ability to self-regulate gets hijacked. And I just, it's kind of a funny analogy, but I used to have two cats and now I have one. But when I had my other cat, they'd both be sleeping and all of a sudden one of them would have a bad dream and like jump up and kind of freak out and be like, and that would freak out the other one, so then they would jump up and freak out, and then that one would get freaked out that that one was getting freaked out, and they would start chasing each other around the house and attacking each other.
A freak out party.
Exactly. And so it can be like they've got mirror neurons too. So it can be like that in our situation, particularly when it's a fight flight. We are wired as social creatures, social beings, to seek one another for safety, to look into the face of another and the tone of voice from another to signal to us if we're safe or not, and to bring that sense of safety. So it of course, when your child is having a hard time, of course you're going to initially have that matching experience, because you're wired that way. Like that is a very core survival strategy is danger, danger. Oh really? Okay, danger, danger. And so
Right.
um, we as the caregivers have to work on our own self-awareness so that we can then um, be in a place to mirror for the child, you're safe, you're safe, it's safe, I'm safe, you're safe, everything's safe right now. But what I've come to realize is that it takes more than that self-control, more than that okay, I got, deep breathing, calming the nervous system. It really takes like an internal sense of self compassion. So turning inward and taking a moment and recognizing, whew, I'm having a hard time right now. And, how can I bring some compassion and comfort to myself in this moment? How can I accompany myself in this very difficult moment I'm finding myself in? And I'm a person that prays, and so I'll take a moment to pray, um, and and really search for that sense of being accompanied in my difficulty. Um, and then when I can have compassion for myself, I can calm and soothe myself in that genuine, connected way. Then I can mirror that to the child. So I'm not just mirroring being calm, I'm mirroring compassion. So that child who doesn't know, their brain hasn't had enough experiences with being calm, with feeling safe, and with feeling that compassion, that being accompanied in their struggles, being accompanied in their fear, um, with compassion, that that new pathway that that you're I don't know, yes, we're hacking through, but I don't know, maybe we're also sort of, I don't know, compassionately spreading the reeds, spreading the reeds gently to form an invitation for a new way.
I like that. I like that. Yeah. I think that's so missing out there, that self-compassion piece. Not necessarily, I mean, I think that is part of putting the oxygen mask on, but I know myself, I do try to white knuckle it because nobody's taught me like how to do this, and so learning TBRI and their mindfulness strategies and learning like, okay, what am I bringing to the table versus my kid? And one thing that I've come to realize is what you're saying, either I'm going to co-regulate my kid or my kid's going to co-regulate me. So I actually say that to myself and I practice deep breathing because I think that's another thing that gets overlooked. We say, oh, deep breathe, but it actually works when you work it, when you do it. And so I practice doing those things, but the piece that you've given me and helping me understand, and I'm even understanding it more through this conversation today, is in that moment having that self-compassion as well. And like we had a conversation the other day and I felt like I got an aha out of that conversation, and I'd like us to share that conversation. You probably recall it better than I do. But we were talking about my son and I was explaining about how I was had a hard time, and then you do you remember exactly how you worded it? I just remember the feeling, the part we're talking about, the feeling part of it in my mind. But it was, you had compassion for me and saying like, wow, yeah, that does sound like that was really difficult. And I don't know, can you remember what you shared with me?
Yeah. So your son was wanting to get some clothes, I think, and you had said yes, okay, yeah, let's do that. And but it was like 7 o'clock at night, and he wanted to. So then the next thing was, well, let's do it now. And you immediately were feeling like, you know, frustrated that why. I said yes, but I can't say yes now. Why can't that first yes be good enough to carry us through, till tomorrow, or the weekend when we can do that? And then it became this. The stores are closing soon, and I'm in my pajamas and looking it up, uh, to show to him using reason, like, look, the store closes in less than an hour. By the time we get there, it's not going to work. And he was really dysregulated, like really upset, and wanted that to happen. And so I think we so want to calm that nervous system down, because right, we're thinking, um, the cat fight, right? It's
Right.
like, if I can calm him down, then I'm gonna be, more calmed down. And so, um, your, your being calm is dependent on him being calm. And so the goal becomes calm him down, But then I'm also really frustrated right now, and I'm upset that I even have to go there right now. And so I mirrored to you, that wow, that must have been really, frustrating for you to be like all cozy in your jammies and wanting to just, relax for the rest of the evening. And frustrating too that he was pushing it and pushing it. And so I mirrored your what I perceived as what you were feeling, and yet I continued to mirror with resonance. And so mirroring with resonance is more than just saying, wow, you look angry, you seem like you're angry and upset, which is definitely um, validating feelings and helping to identify feelings. But the resonance part is the part of compassion that then says, um, you know, that that piece of seeing your world and reflecting your world of, wow, you were all cozy in your jammies, and and then thinking about your needs. That are you were you feeling like a need for being appreciated as a mom,
I needed the validation that I said yes to the clothes because I didn't want to say yes to the clothes.
Right, right. You said yes to the clothes, but you
I did my yes. Oh,
I resonated the essence of the background. Like, what not just your feelings, but what was the background of what was going on in your feelings. And then I took it one step further to say, and again, there are different ways. And I know Tristan, we're friends, that I can go there in this way with her. But I said, wouldn't it be sweet if you could have, just, you had this really awesome magic wand that you could just wave over him when you see that train wreck coming, and that then the trains just suddenly line up, and the cars line up, and then they keep going, down the track, and he waves to you and says, thanks, mom. Okay, I'll see you tomorrow when we can talk about this more and make a plan. And then we turn that frustration together into laughter, and into a way that you and I were connecting, with with empathy and with humor, and not humor out of like a sense of, like I said, this is a delicate process where you can't just be, humorous if somebody's not in a space where they can receive that. But they're ways to resonate with what's the need, and the need is to be understood. The need is to have compassion for our situation, and I just gauged it in that moment, and yay, I gauged it right that I could use humor to help you. And how did you feel then after I said that?
Oh yeah, I loved it. And that was what I shared with you, was that um, I felt heard and I felt understood, and that frustration just melted away. And I didn't even know that I had a level of that frustration still within me. But then when um, when you shared what you had just shared with everyone, like I did, we resonated with each other and we connected with each other. So we only have a few minutes left. I would like to get to the three questions that I always end on. But maybe do you have like a top few tips on how we can do the self-compassion with ourselves when we don't have you with us?
Okay.
So is there a way that we can solely do this by ourselves? Because so many times we're triggered when nobody else is around. It's just us and our kid. So what are your quick tips for self-compassion in the moment by ourselves?
Yeah, it's a practice, and it takes practice, and so really it's that mindfulness. It's being aware of your own bodily sensations, your own sensory awareness, and practicing that, taking the time to check in with yourself. And just like you're building up any muscle, that's going to be a skill to work on. And then when you mess up, which we all do, then you have the you're going to hear that critical voice, and you're going to hear that, oh, I gotta fix this, I gotta do better next time, I gotta, oh, I shouldn't have blown up like that, I shouldn't have said it that way, or oh wow, I was critical of my child, and I should, all the shoulds. um that really is not, that is a coping um you know behavior for yourself to motivate you, but it's not going to move you into a place that will truly help you and your child. So I just say practice bringing that compassion to yourself. And so when you hear that critical voice, you could say to that critical voice, have compassion for that voice. Say, wow, you're really wanting me to address this because you care about me and you care about my family and my child, and so this is something I'm going to continue to work on, and have compassion for when you make those mistakes along the way. And there are lots of different mindfulness practices out there that some people can't sit and have a quiet time. Some people need to have a moving meditative time, like go for having a walk of quiet time and appreciating time out in nature, or a movement practice that works for you, that helps you to really start to get in touch with your body.
I love that. I'm not taking notes. I've been taking notes this whole time. I always learn so much. I tell that to every single guest, and it's always true. I learn so much from people like you coming on. So I appreciate your time. Before we wrap up, I always have three questions that I ask that I'm going to ask you real quick. So, what brings you joy?
So the things that bring me the most joy are the small stuff. So whether it's those small moments of victory that I see in the kids that I work with, like it can be the tiniest thing that is it's a mile marker for them, and I just love that. Or when I see a parent and a child connect in a new and different way, or when I see those breakthroughs, the welling up of the eyes that tells me, we're going somewhere here. I love that, and I also love. I, I have joy in the small things, the micro world. So I love to take pictures, and I love to see the small stuff out in nature, and and really zeroing in with my camera and finding the beauty in the small stuff.
I love that answer. And I know that you appreciate the small stuff. I love your photograph collections. You notice a theme when you go out on your nature walks, and you take pictures of those themes and you post them and put them all together, and they're always beautiful. So that's one of the things I love about you, is that you notice the small things. Um, so my
That's
next question.
child, by the way, that started as a little girl.
Oh, that's nice that that's one of the qualities that God has given you that has endured through your life. That's special. Um, so speaking of your younger self, what is one thing that you would tell your younger self when you first started this journey that you know now? Like if you could go back and say that to yourself, what would you tell yourself?
So what's interesting is when I knew you were going to ask me that question, I thought about it and I realized that I regularly now go and talk to my younger self, and I
Mm,
accompany my younger self in those difficult moments. So whatever that difficult moment is that I'm reflecting back on, I accompany that little inner girl, and I just say, this is, you know I can see that you're really scared right now, and or I can see, your sadness right now. So I regularly return to, as part of my own healing journey, I return to that little girl, and
mm,
give her that compassionate mirroring that
mm.
she needed in those moments.
Mm, that's a cool answer. Nobody's ever answered like that before. I really like that one. And I love that because that you do it regularly. One of the most impactful guided imagery or meditations that someone took me on, it was a group of us, and it was like a healing trauma kind of workshop thing, was going back to that younger self at the point of some of that trauma, and as an adult, and giving that younger child that self-compassion, and it was really moving. So I love the fact that you do that regularly. That's a pretty neat thing. um, all
Thanks.
right, so last question: what foster adoption myth would you like to just blow up right now, just dispel?
I think that it's that compliance is the goal, and that compliance is the litmus test for success. I think that it's definitely connection is the goal, and connection is the litmus test. And so we didn't have time today to really get into talking about, fight, flight, freeze, and then appease is
Mm,
another coping behavior where the social engagement system is hijacked for the purposes of of being able to feel in control, versus relying on the social engagement system of authentic connection to feel safe. So it can look like, it can appear that, oh, my, the child is compliant, whereas inside they are really, they're not authentically embodying themselves, connected with themselves, or connecting with you or with others. And and so that's a mask. So
right.
that's a big one, for me, is that it's all about that authentic, compassionate, connecting.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. I mean, we know people pleasing is definitely, kind of can fall in that category, right? And I love that you bring up that compliance. Um, isn't the goal and isn't the, a marker necessarily of success, but that it's all about connection and relationship. And I don't think our parents can hear that enough, because the world will say that we are coddling our kids, we're being permissive with our kids, we need to, bring down the axe, so to speak, or whatever it is, whatever weird advice that, you get from your family, friends, and the world. So I love just affirming the families on here, that connection with children who have that developmental complex trauma is the goal. And compliance oftentimes comes in time with our kiddos. So
Like
that is
authentic compliance.
authentic compliance. Okay.
I don't
Um, So that is all we have time for today. But like I said, and like Deborah said, she is going to join us in the after party. So you're welcome to stay on for that. That is just a time where we have no agenda. We just kind of hang out together for a half an hour. On June 15th, we're going to have Dr. David Adams. He is a psychologist as well as a TBR practitioner, as well as an adoptive dad of 2 foster kiddos that he got and through the foster care system, and they were older children. So he's going to talk to us about how to deal with like lying, stealing, hoarding, all those behaviors that we see, and how do we do that from a trauma-informed TBRI way. So anyways, Deborah, I just want to thank you for joining us today. Really appreciate it. It's been a wonderful conversation. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much for inviting me, and I look forward to connecting with everyone afterwards. And as well, I'm not sure if Max put it in the chat, but if you want to connect with me outside of our time together, I'm hoping, I'm not monitoring the chat, but I think that Max is putting my contact there in the chat. And I just wanted to also let you all know that I've been developing a family therapeutic movement program that I'm hoping to be able to offer sometime, later this summer. It's still in development. I'm calling it Creature Comforts, and it's a just a therapeutic movement program to help calm the nervous system, to help you connect with yourself and your child connect with themselves, and for you all to connect with one another. And it's through stories about animals. So it's a neat thing that just kind of started to, little creative juices started to click to combine my past love of animals with something therapeutic and beneficial for families.
Well, we look forward to that. And her private Facebook group is in the chat, as well as her email. So if you'd like to email her and let her know that you're interested in just connecting more with her, and look forward to that Creature Comfort. That sounds very exciting. So thank you all who called in for this week's Replenish Zoom. Hope that you feel just replenished in your journey of raising kids from hard places. And I just pray that you have a good month until we see you next time. So don't forget to join our private Facebook page, Safe, Precious, and Heard, where you can see all the previous replenishes, as well as get the latest updates on what we're doing. So thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.